to our forum on the privacy or personal data privacy ordinance legislative proposal from the government that has been put out a little while ago. I know that there are some people who will be coming in later on or dribbling in, so we'll let them come in later and we'll get started not too much later than our scheduled time. We're very happy tonight that we have the representative from the bureau responsible for this particular legislation, the Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Bureau, and also representatives from the Privacy Commissioner's Office to help us brief us a little bit on first the government's proposal and then some of the comments from the Privacy Commissioner's Office about this legislation. So first of all, let's have Ms. Evelyn Wong, who's the Deputy Secretary for CMAB, to give us a briefing on the legislative proposal and the government's their position at the moment. And also then we'll hear from Mr. Henry Chang from the PCO on their comments. And we know that they have the Privacy Commissioners have a series of their positions that they would want to maybe respond to the government, and we'll let their information serve as the purpose of giving us some backgrounds for some of you, especially for those of you who may not have read everything in the consultation paper. And then afterwards, hopefully, we will invite representatives from the industry, particularly from some of the security industries and IT industries, to give a little bit of their comments, and then we'll have a free-flow discussion and your questions and so on. So without more ado, let's invite Ms. Wong to give us your presentation.
I know that we're going to have a number of speakers this evening, so I'll try to keep my presentation brief. By way of some background, as you might know already, the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance was enacted in 1995, so it has been in force for over 10 years. And about 2 years ago, we started a review of the ordinance with the support of the Privacy Commissioner, and last year we put forward a consultation document setting out a series of proposals to amend the ordinance or bring it up to date in the light of technological and other developments in the last decade. And earlier this year, we were more or less complete in our consideration or examination of the views received last year. And then it came the Octo's incident over the summer, and we then took another look at our proposals and beefed it up to for better protection to personal data privacy in the course of direct marketing activities. So I would now like to go into our major proposals. There are 37 in total. I'm not going to explain them to you one by one this evening. I'll just focus on the major ones. The first one is about the collection and use of personal data in direct marketing. And after the October's incident, we have taken a closer look at how enterprises collect and use the data of their customers in purpose not directly related to the original purpose of collection. And we now propose that if a data user intends to use the personal data collected for direct marketing activities, then the data user's personal information collection statement should be reasonably specific about the intended direct marketing activities that he is going to undertake. And also, if he is going to transfer any of the personal data to other parties, then he has to be specific about the classes of transfers. And also, he has to let his consumers know the kinds of data to be transferred. And And the presentation of such information has to be understandable and reasonably readable by the general public. And he should also provide an option for the data subjects to choose not to agree to any of the use or any of the transfer of the data for direct marketing. So what we are proposing here is an opt-out regime. And non-compliance with any of these new requirements will be subject to the issue of an enforcement notice by the Privacy Commissioner. And if a data user does not comply with any of these requirements and he subsequently uses or transfers the personal data for direct marketing purposes, then this will be an offense under our proposal. And also, if he complies with the requirements but then uses personal data for a direct marketing activity or transfer the data to a class of transferees to which the data subject has earlier indicated disagreement, then he also commits an offense. And lastly, we also propose that if the data user uses or transfers the personal data for a marketing activity or transfer the data to a class of persons or transfer the kind of data not covered in the personal information collection statement, then he also commits an offense. And for all of these offenses, the penalty will be a fine of $500,000 and imprisonment for 3 years. Another proposal related to direct marketing is to raise the penalty for one of the existing offense under the ordinance. Currently, under Section 34 of the ordinance, a data user shall not use any personal data for the purpose of direct marketing if the data subject has previously asked him not to use the data for this particular purpose. And if the data user still uses the data for direct marketing, then he commits an offense. The current penalty is only $10,000, and we propose to raise it to a fine of $500,000. And the imprisonment term will be 3 years. And this is to enhance the deterrent effect. Our second proposal is related to unauthorized sale of personal data by a data user. This is also in response to the Optimus incident. Our proposal is that if a data user intends to sell the personal data that he has collected, then the data user should inform the data subject in writing of the kinds of personal data to be sold and to whom the data will be sold. And the presentation of the information has to be understandable and reasonably readable by the general public. The data user also has to provide the data subject with an opportunity to indicate whether he or she agrees or disagrees with the sale. So in our consultation report, we have not stated our preferred option. We leave it open because we would like to hear the committee's views about whether we should adopt the opt-in or the opt-out model. And again, non-compliance with any of these requirements will be subject to the issue of an enforcement notice by the Privacy Commissioner. And if the data user does not comply with the requirements that I have just mentioned, and then sell the personal data to another person for a monetary or in-kind gain, he commits an offense. Or if he complies with the requirements, but he sells the data against the wish of the data subject, then he also commits an offense. The penalty that we propose will be a fine of $1 million and imprisonment for 5 years. The third proposal is about the disclosure of personal data for profits or malicious purposes. Under this proposal, we are targeting at acts such as obtaining data by an employee without the consent of the company, and then disclosing or transferring the data to another party for profits or for a malicious purpose. So here we are talking about disclosure of personal data by a third party, not by the data user himself. And we propose that the penalty will be a fine of $1 million and imprisonment for 5 years. When we consulted the public on this proposal last year, many of the comments that we received were about the definition of malicious purposes, because the public would like to be clear about what we have in mind before we write this offense into the law. So after studying some other relevant legislation, we now propose that one option is to define malicious purpose as act with a view to gain for oneself or another, or with an intent to cause loss, including injury to feelings to another. I understand that this proposal has attracted some concerns from the IT community, so I would like to hear your views or learn more about your comments or the details of this proposal later on this evening. The next proposal is related to the IT sector. It's about the regulation of data processors and subcontracting activities. Currently, under the ordinance, we adopt an indirect regulation approach, meaning that we regulate data processors through the data users, and the data users have to be responsible for the act of data processors that he has engaged. And when we consulted the public last year, many of the views received, in particular those from the IT sector, point out that since many data processors only provide a platform for data processing, and they may not know whether data that they are processing contain personal data or their use purpose, so it will be very onerous and burdensome for them if we are going to adopt a direct regulation approach. So bearing in mind these comments and concerns, we now propose to continue to adopt an indirect regulation approach, but we propose to go one step further, requiring the data users to use contractual or other means to ensure that the data processors that they have engaged will comply with the provisions under the ordinance. And on compliance with this new requirement, will be subject to the issue of an enforcement notice by the Privacy Commissioner. The next proposal is also related to the IT sector. It's about the personal data security breach notification. We consulted the public whether we should adopt a voluntary or mandatory system last year. While most of the comments agree that there should be some form of breach notification, most of them are concerned that since there are now no common practice or objective notification standards, if a mandatory system is to be adopted, then data users will be very worried about how the system is going to operate, and also they're worried about the onerous burden that will be brought to them. So we are heeding these views. We now propose to adopt a voluntary system at this stage, and we will adjust the detailed arrangements having regard to our operational experience. And in this regard, the Privacy Commissioner promulgated in June this year a guidance note entitled Data Breach Handling and the Giving of Breach Notifications. And the Office of the Privacy Commissioner will also undertake promotional and educational initiatives to promote the adoption of a data breach notification system. And also they will try to assist data users to make appropriate notification. We also propose to enhance the powers of the Privacy Commissioner by conferring him with the power to provide legal assistance to aggrieved data subjects who intend to institute legal proceedings against data users in order to seek compensation under the ordinance. There are a number of proposals that we do not intend to take forward after examining the views received during the public consultation last year. The first one is related to sensitive personal data. Last year, we consulted the public whether there should be in a category, so-called a category of sensitive data, and then subject this category, personal data, to enhance regulation. And during the consultation, there were no mainstream views on the coverage of sensitive personal data, and also how sensitive personal data, if it can be defined, is going to be regulated. There were also strong objections from the IT sector to classify biometric data as sensitive personal data. So we now propose not to go ahead with to trying to define what sensitive personal data are, and also to come up with a more enhanced regime for sensitive personal data. Instead, we propose that the Privacy Commissioner should step up promotion and education, and where necessary, issue codes of practice or guidelines on sensitive personal data. We also propose that the Privacy Commissioner should continue to discuss with the IT sector possible measures to enhance the protection of biometric data. And lastly, I would like to briefly introduce proposals relating to the powers of the Privacy Commissioner that we intend not to pursue. The first one is the proposal to grant criminal investigation and prosecution power to the Privacy Commissioner. We do not intend to pursue because we consider that we should continue to have separate organizations to handle investigations and prosecutions so as to ensure checks and balances. And secondly, about the proposal to empower the Privacy Commissioner to award compensation to aggrieved data subjects. Again, we do not intend to pursue because we think that it is inappropriate to confer enforcement power and the power to grant compensation on the same organization. We think that it should be for the court to decide on the compensation, if any. And lastly, on the proposal to empower the Privacy Commissioner to impose monetary penalty on serious contraventions of data protection principles. Again, we consider that this is inappropriate to put the enforcement power and the power to impose penalty in the same organization. We believe that it should be for the court to decide on the monetary penalty if there is an offense. And for serious contravention of the provisions in the ordinance, we propose that we should a criminal offense instead. And we have proposed some new additional offenses, which we have briefly introduced earlier in my presentation. So here is just a very brief description of our major proposals. And we are now having further public discussions, and this will last until the end of this month. And we welcome views from the IT sector and also, of course, from other sectors of the community on the specific arrangements and details of our proposals. So I look forward to hearing your views later this evening. And if you have any other views, you are welcome to submit written submissions or written representations to my bureau before the end of this month. Thank you.
Thank you, President, and I think we will have some opportunity for you for questioning, making questions to President later on when our panel is on. So let me now introduce Mr. Henry Chang. He is the IT advisor for the Privacy Commissioner's Office, and let's hear from Mr. Chang first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. Allow me to switch over to the presentation purposes. Thank you again to the professional comments and all supporting organizations who have invited me to this evening's forum, giving us the opportunity to talk to you about the Commissioner's view on the report on the public consultation or review of the personal data privacy ordinance. Since Edwin has already given you a grand introduction of the entire proposal, I'm not going to embarrass myself of repeating what she just said. Instead, I want to take the next 10-15 minutes to give you a view from the Privacy Commissioner on the proposal, and in particular, some of the proposals that the government is not taking forward, which we believe that based on our own experience over the last 10-15 years, we feel that those are important proposals that need to be considered again. And also in some cases, some of the proposals are put forward together. So if you just think one out of, say, four of the proposal forward, you feel that the effect is not there if you try to break it down as well. Before I go into detail, allow me to give you some background of the review of the ordinance. As Captain was saying that back at the end of 2007, the Commissioner has, using our own resources, to carry out a review of the ordinance. Again, as I said before, based on our own 10-15 years experience on the law enforcement, we propose to put forward some 50 legislative proposals or amendments to the government. And around August 2009, the government then, after having read through our proposal or suggestions, put forward a first round of consultation paper with 44 proposals. And the proposal exercise was concluded, as it were, around the end of last year, and we submitted our own proposal or response to the government as well. And then 2 months ago, in October this year, the government then released the second round of the proposal of reports, putting forward 37 proposals. So if you do the sums, you can see that there are about at least 7 proposals that the government is not putting forward. And I want to spend some time to talk about those 7 proposals. First of all, the Commissioner welcomes the 37 proposals that's been put forward by the government. We feel that those 37 proposals address a lot of concern that we've seen over the years. However, in terms of the proposals that the government is not taking forward, I want to break them down into 4 main groups of activities or areas that I want to talk about in the next 10-15 years. In minutes. Among these 4 areas, the first 2 I would call them they are IT industry related. I want to stress the fact that we're not targeting the IT industry, and we're talking about the direct regulation of the data processes and sensitive personal data. I'll be detail later on. And then afterwards, I want to investigate, although I know in the audience everybody's from the IT industry, but we are also, in a way, data subjects. So I feel that maybe we are interested in knowing a bit more about the general protection of personal data as far as the data subject or person is concerned. So do allow me some time to talk about the other 2 really important areas, i.e. the direct marketing regime as well as the sanctioning power of the PCPD. Going to the direct regulation of data processing, the government at the moment is proposing an indirect regulation of the data process, i.e. They expect the data user, those organizations who collect personal data from the subject to have a contractual relationship or binding with the data processor when it comes to the following the legislation. But what I want to explain is that currently, if you look at our legislative model, if I usually call it a data cycle or a life cycle of personal data management, all the way from the collection of personal data, the processing of personal data use, to retention and destruction, the entire life cycle. As far as the current legislation is concerned, there's a group of people called data processors. They act on behalf, very often acting on behalf of data users. They are currently actually not under the legislation at all. Meaning, if there were data leakage or problem that's from the data processor, we as an enforcement agency, we have no power of going to carry out any kind of investigation from these kind of data processes, because in a way they're not defined within the law, or the law allow them to be totally escaped, as it were, from the legislation. So as far as that logic is concerned, we feel that's very important that we have to put it right, so put the data processes back into under the umbrella of the legislation to be regulated directly. Having said that, I want to stress that the requirement to regulate that is actually pretty, it's not actually very heavy. We're not actually treating them as data users, but they are a special, or in our proposal, we are proposing that they only need to follow 3 sections or conditions, as it were, as far as data process is concerned. The first 2 groups are really to do with the fact that we want them to honor or respect the purposes as well as the intention to which the personal data are being entrusted to them. Take a nice example. For example, a bank, if they outsource statement printing work to a data processor, these data processors may or may not be IT, part of the IT industry. If we take the example of printing or bank statements, for example, what we are really asking this kind of printer to do or to follow, as far as the law is concerned, is if the bank asks you to print statements, or if the bank gives you the personal data to print statements, don't do anything else with that personal data apart from printing statements, to respect the purpose by which the data processor are being entrusted with the personal data. If the contract were lasting for 1 year, Then after a year, you destroy the data, the data processor should then destroy data, i.e. respecting the retention of personal data. That's all that we're asking for from the data processors. We're not asking them to do anything more than that. They don't need to know the original purpose or original intention of personal data being collected by a bank. This is what we're asking for. We're asking for them to respect the trust from the bank or the data user to them as far as handling personal data is concerned. And third requirement is just that they need to exercise reasonable, practical steps to ensure the security of those personal data. That's all. I want to stress again that the idea of the regulation of data processes not directing the IT industry. There could be all sorts of data processes. For example, a bank, if they need to dispose paper records, they may be engaging a disposal firm. They are data processors. In those cases, all we're asking them is that if the bank asks you to dispose of a paper record, don't just sell it to recyclers for more money. If you're supposed to shred them or destroy them or somehow, you only deal with data, and that's all. And if the contract says that you must destroy the data within a week or something like that, then you don't keep it longer than the requirement. And as far as security is concerned, then if you are just handling paper, then for example, if you're collecting paper from a bank, make sure that they are in locked cabinets because they are supposed to be sensitive and important, and all sorts of things. And if you're transporting them, make sure they don't fall off the back of the lorry, things like that. So that's all that we're asking for as far as the so-called regulations of data processes are concerned. I think it's also important that we bring the legislation back to an international standard, because again, I'm not aware of any other jurisdiction that would have a oversight loophole for the data processes. As far as many legislations, overseas jurisdictions are concerned, they pretty much treat data processes as data users. So that actually poses an interesting question, because those data protection authorities would have certain requirement or restriction on how their data users are transporting or transferring the personal data offshore for processing. Pretty much, typically they would expect their own data users to offshore the handling of personal data to another jurisdiction that has a comparable legislation on personal data protection. Now imagine the European communities, if a data user tell their regulators that they are exporting or transferring personal data to Hong Kong for processing, and if the data protection authority know that Hong Kong has certain loophole in terms of data processing, what do you think they think? Would they look very favorably on these data users of transporting these personal data to Hong Kong for processing? So that's a question that we have to think about in terms of transporting of data process, personal data across different jurisdictions. And also, I want to say that is that what we're proposing is really just plug a loophole of the law. After introducing the regulation, direct regulation of data processes, we're not lowering the regulation of the data user. Because when I look at the report on the consultation paper, there are some views to say that if we start to regulate data processes, i.e. regulating Hong Kong data processes, then a lot of this work will be offshore to avoid being regulated. But imagine if you were a data user and you have to choose between offshoring your personal data processing to Hong Kong, where the data processor has to be subject to strong regulation, against to another data processor overseas that's not subject to any regulation, knowing again that those local regulators would be subject to law, in strong terms. Who would you trust? Would you trust somebody locally who has to be subject to law, or an overseas party who is not subject to law? Bearing in mind that at the end of the day, if anything goes wrong, you would, as a data user, still have to bear the full burden of the law. My imagination is that people would probably choose the local processor because because they have more assurance of that. And also, again, well, a lot of people say, well, we could be falling under the law just simply by omission or error. But again, this is not a direct offense, so anything that goes wrong will just be subject to enforcement notice. So that's the area of direct regulation of data processing. The second pretty controversial area is on sensitive personal data. Again, I want to clarify what our original proposal was. Our original proposal was really just twofold. The first one is that we want to introduce the concept of sensitive personal data. Because, again, these sensitive personal data are, again, in other jurisdictions such as the European Union and Australia, they do have the concept of sensitive personal data for years. And they do have stronger regulation of those personal data, I'll explain it in a moment. Now, our original proposal was really to A, have a concept of sensitive personal data, and B, put in a number of important personal data to be under this category. We're talking about sensitive personal data such as racial, ethnic origins, political affiliation, religious belief, trade union membership, health information, sexual life, and biometric. We're not targeting, again, the industry of singling out biometrics. We want to be on par with the international community to introduce a group of sensitive personal data so that we are, internationally on par with our jurisdiction. And also, I want to stress another thing is that even after we've got this concept of sensitive personal data, all that we're asking for in terms of stronger protection is that before you handle this personal data, i.e., before you collect, use, process this sensitive personal data, you get the express consent from the data subject. That's all we're asking for. You get this express prescribed consent from the data subject. Because currently, under law, you might be made to ask for certain personal data from a third party. For example, if I want to get in contact with Aaron, and I don't know him, or I have no contact, I can ask him a third person, so long as I declare the user, and so on and so forth, that's fine. But after we've introduced the concept of sensitive personal data, we want to make sure that before you collect and use sensitive personal data, get the express consent from the data subject. That's all we're asking for. If you look at the report, 4.2.4a is the exact requirement. And if you look further, there are 4.2.4b, c, e, f, g. These are all the exemptions. Because knowing the difficulty of obtaining prescribed consent of health information when someone is in the casualty area, there are actually provisions on examining the requirement of getting the express consent if it relates to health and life and death or the requirements is what required by law and things like that. Again, I want to bring up the other issue about cross-border jurisdiction issue. Again, sensitive personal data is a concept in the European community as well as the European Union as well as Australia. So again, the data user were transporting personal data to Hong Kong would their data protection authority think about the parity of the law between these locations. Okay, allow me to take off my IT hat and put on a general data subject hat. I want to talk about the direct marketing regime, which I hope all of us have an interest in as well. The government currently is actually proposing an opt-out regime as far as the direct marketing regime is concerned. The Commissioner's view is that an opt-in regime is a better protection to personal data. It gives the basic right of self-determination back to the public. So as far as the Commission is concerned, an opt-in regime still is best. I know there's still a lot of debate about the community as to whether the opt-in is the best way forward. So the Commissioner, if there's no consensus on that, and the general public decides to go for an opt-out regime, then the Commission's view is that even an opt-out regime, we should have a do not call register for person-to-person calls. Currently, often the Telecommunication Authority maintain a do not call register with us, excluding person-to-person calls. After carrying out a survey towards the end of last year, which is a very interesting survey with lots of interesting figures. As far as the results concerned, apparently 40% of the general public, as soon as they hear a direct line call, they will cut the line. But at the same time, 40% of people will actually listen to what's the offer until the end of the call as well. So I guess the sentiment is twofold in this. But at the same time, I think we have to respect the wishes of 40% of the general public who do not want to be disturbed by telemarketing calls. If we go for an opt-out regime and do not call register, it's one of the best companies to address or satisfy part of the population who doesn't want to be borders, as well as part of the generation of the public who wants to keep on these offers and things like that. And also we want to post a legislation to allow the data user the rights to ask for the source of personal data whereby a data user has collected information. So if you were called by a data user, as a data subject, you should have the right to ask, hey, where did you get my personal data from? Because not knowing that, you cannot stop the source of leakage as well, or you don't know where it's gone wrong, which allow the personal data to be widely circulated among different people. So this is the Commissioner's view on direct marketing regime. The last one is on the sanctioning power. Andy was talking about that too. We actually bundle our 4 proposals together, which were the ability to provide legal assistance to the aggrieved, as well as granting wanting criminal investigation and prosecuting power to the PCPD, together with the empowering the PCPD to award compensation to the aggrieved, and also to impose monetary penalty on serious contravention of data protection principles. We're going to talk about them one by one. We feel that it's very important that the PCPD is given criminal investigation power as well as prosecution power. At the moment, we only have the power to investigate on contravention of the principles, and as a result, we issue enforcement notice. Now, if any party, any data user do not follow or contravene enforcement notice, we have to then carry out a preliminary investigation. And after we believe that there is a genuine contravention of the enforcement notice, we then refer the case to the police. Police, in a way, will only treat us as prosecution witness. They have to carry out the entire investigation over again. They actually pose a few issues. There's duplication of efforts. There's a time issue because by the time we put forward the case to the police, it could be almost half a year later. And also one thing is that we find out if we refer the case to the police, we then inform the complainants that by the way, we now establish that the data user has contravened and the enforcement notice will pass the case to the police. They would be in touch again and we would go down to the police station and take the statement and offer again, so on and so forth. Apparently, because of the complainant would then stop pursuing the cause because of the agony, as it were, of going through the process again. So in terms of duplication of effort as well as encouraging complainants to carry out or carry forward the case, we feel that granting criminal investigation prosecution power is a better way to handle the whole thing. And also, in terms of the actual power, my understanding is that it will never be at the end of the day in court, PCPD versus somebody, it will always be Hong Kong government versus somebody else. So whatever we bring forward the prosecution, it has to have the agreement of the Secretary of Justice before that could be proceeded. So there's still a check and balance there. It's not as if we could just walk into the court and start the prosecution. What we're saying is that we handle the investigation work, we handle the prosecution work because we do have that expertise, the knowledge of that. And as far as the other two powers concerned, the power to award compensation to grieved is subject. Again, we feel that although the government is putting forward the proposal of allowing us to give the legal assistance to the grieved, typically we expect the government will actually model on the DOC Equal Opportunity Commission's model on giving legal assistance to the grieved. They actually have a lot of barriers. For example, the case has to be a matter of principle and representative and so on and so forth. So there's still a bit of barrier there. It's not going to be as if we could, assist every single case on those situations. And in order to provide some kind of ability to give the better user a sense of our power, as it were, we feel that allowing us to become the ability to award compensation will help a lot. Also, in terms of the balance or check and balance, at the moment, after we issue an enforcement notice, the entire process is subject to appeal to an appeal system. So I cannot imagine that at the end of the day, if we were given the ability to award compensation or to impose monetary penalty, those two processes could not be subject to some kind of appeal mechanism. So there's going to be some kind of check and balance on that as well. But again, we feel that having these two powers will allow us in better hands to handle contravention and bring up the general awareness of data protection, personal data protection. So those were the four main areas that the Commissioner as well as PCP want to put forward to the general public, and hope that we should generate the discussion to those areas. That's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Henry. And I think it's time for us to invite all the panelists, including our previous two speakers, to come up on stage and have a seat, and then we'll go on and listen to get your questions. Please, every one of you, when you come up, I'll give you an introduction. After hearing all the presentation from our two, from Ms. Wong and from Mr. Chang, I hope you are still with us because some of the content, some of the points that they have made are a little bit technical and not easily understood if you're hearing it for the first time. But I think many of you probably have been following this issue for a while, and hopefully you're still with us. But in any event, I think we have, we now want to give a little bit of time, maybe a few minutes each, to our three commentators or panelists, for them to give us their views or questions first. And then we'll have some response from panelists from PCO and CMAB, and then your questions. But let's take the order of first inviting Alan Dyer. I'll go with this order. Alan first. And Alan is, of course, very senior IT security expert in Hong Kong, and I'll let him speak first, and then to Ian and SC.
I think the biggest issue with the legislative proposal is what's left out. I'm talking about the complex relationship between copyright, privacy, obscenity, and free speech. So the information age has changed things in ways we do not yet fully understand, and our laws on all of these cannot know. For example, when intimate pictures are published, what could or should be done? Credit to Edison Chen for raising this point. Under our current legislation, there's no protection for subjects of pictures. But the photographer has copyright, but is copyright even appropriate? Copyright is a contract between the creator and artistic work and society. The creator gets time-limited rights to make money from the work, and society gets the work in the long run. But intimate pictures are never supposed to be published. There's no intention to publish there. My thought is that the data protection principle fits that sort of case very well. Take a look at principle number 3. Personal data should be used for the purposes for which they were collected or directly related purpose. So distributing to strangers on the internet is forbidden unless the subject gives permission. That matches how I feel I would like the law to protect this type of information. The problem, however, is enforcement. All the Privacy Commissioner can do at the moment is to issue an enforcement notice. And then, if the offence is repeated, the offender can be prosecuted. Why do you need to leak private information twice? Once it's leaked, it stays leaked. Once the leak has happened, the damage is done. Therefore, there must be a deterrent punishment. What surprises me is that the Commissioner has even shied away from issuing an enforcement notice. I'm thinking about the investigations, the Octopus Rewards programme. In that case, the information was sold to a third party for millions of dollars. Yet apparently it's not likely that the contravention would continue. So we come to economics. Information can be worth money. Who has a supermarket loyalty card? Anyone here? All of you, I expect. Do you realise how much valuable information about your family shopping habits you're giving out? Of course, it's a fact. I get 0.2% discount for using that card. And they get to know more about how I shop than I know. Hong Kong is known as for its free market economy. But as any economist will tell you, markets are efficient when buyers and sellers have the same level of information. If I was a supermarket, I would be planning to put RFID chips into the loyalty cards and update the prices as you approach, so I reach an optimum price point for you. It's not just supermarket economics. I predict there's going to be a crisis in the insurance market. All insurance is based on ignorance. Neither the insurer or the insured knows what's going to happen. So the insurer sets the premium according to probabilities. Too much knowledge destroys that. And medical science and information technology are providing that knowledge. Already genetic factors involved in many diseases are known, and more being discovered. DNA sequencing is becoming cheaper. Will we be required to provide a genetic sample when we apply for health insurance? And some people therefore get very low premiums, they're not at risk for many diseases, and others get unaffordable premiums. DNA is personal information. How much more personal can you get? Do we want privacy laws that protect and prevent insurers demanding a sample? What if an insurer takes an inquiry form, carefully processes it, and to recover DNA from the speck down your fingers? One of the things the consultation asked was whether sensitive data should be given greater protection. I don't think you can divide data by sensitivity. How the data is used. I constantly shed DNA, that's dead skin cells, without worrying, until someone uses my DNA to decide my health insurance premiums. I do not find my Hong Kong ID card number to be embarrassing. I hold birthday parties, and even tell people my mother's maiden name. They're not items of information that need to be kept secret, until, of course, some idiot who knows nothing about security decides that they can be used to authenticate my identity for something, like activation of my credit card or access to my phone records. I would like to see this misuse of personal data as supposedly secret authentication tokens stamped out. The practice was always insecure. but we have increasing repositories of shared personal information that can be searched by strangers. I'm talking about social networks. A friend posts a remark about how much fun they had at your birthday party, and suddenly a criminal has the last piece of information they need to misuse your credit card. We need a review that takes a holistic view of how laws should control the information society we're building. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Let's get to the response from the points that you raised later on. Let me turn the time over to Ian Christophus. Ian is representing the Professional Information Security Association today.
Thanks, John. PISA has put forward a submission to the Commissioner, and you can find that in the very long Annex 4 to the government's to the Constitutional and Affairs Bureau. So I don't want to necessarily repeat that, and I'd like to make some comments that are not necessarily PISA comments, but are my comments. And just jump quickly to a couple of things. One of the areas where PISA did comment, that we didn't comment on all of the proposals, because there were many proposals where the PISA members would take different views, but one of the areas that we did comment on was on the regulation of data processes. And we did push for a mandatory rather than a voluntary scheme. And one of the reasons behind that is that there is a lack of evidence that is important in the data security and privacy area. And you can't easily get the evidence unless you have mandatory reporting to actually force people to actually put the evidence into the public area. And I think it's very true that there's a lot of disincentive in the voluntary scheme for people to actually volunteer to give the information away. So whilst I hear the arguments of the need for setting a regime in place, if the voluntary scheme is seen as a way to transition to a mandatory scheme, then that sounds like a good plan, but I think ultimately it should be a mandatory scheme, otherwise it won't be terribly effective. The other point, I think, sorry, that was on breach notification. Switch my topics there accidentally. The regulation of data processes. I think one of the things that seems missing in both the view coming from the Bureau and the view coming from the Commissioner's Office is putting data processes into a single category. And I wonder whether there is a way to get past this nexus by comparing the difference, say, between, say, Amazon cloud computing services or one of the other cloud computing service providers, where the data user is just simply putting data up into the cloud using services, and the data processor really is not doing anything with the data, has no real knowledge of it, versus where you are outsourcing it to someone to actually do something value added, such as the example that Henry said before, where you've got someone printing statements or something like that. And I wonder whether part of the issue here is to actually make a distinction between data processors who are actually doing something of value with the data and those who are actually just simply handling data, but they don't know what the data is, and it's really under the full control of the data user. And maybe there needs to be some provision there to have that clearly stated in the contract, that there is something contractual that clearly makes the data processor subject to the privacy laws, that it's a very clear and deliberate thing in the contract, that the data processor then understands and knows by signing the contract that they will be subject to those laws. So they're just some suggestions that I have in that regard. The other areas, and I'm trying to cover everything, it's a very big topic and lots of different sort of areas. One of the other areas that we commented on as PISA in the past is the lack of the enactment of Section 33 of the ordinance, and whilst we're very pleased that the government and the Privacy Commissioner's Office have looked at this, have reviewed the legislation, we think that's absolutely a good thing and timely and necessary, etc. It seemed very surprising that the whole issue of transport of data flows has not been addressed as part of this review. It seems like a very strange omission. Henry mentioned the issue of transport and data flows, but did not mention Section 33. The options, there are a number of options in that regard, and there may well be good reasons why Section 33 is problematic to implement. But there has been no public discussion as to what the objections are to Section 33. I have not seen anything along that regard. Clearly, there is an impediment in not having Section 33. There might be an impediment for people outsourcing data processing to Hong Kong because we don't have those protections that are equivalent to the EU or Australia or a number of countries. But there may well be problems in having that in terms of, for example, maybe outsourcing data processing from Hong Kong into China, for example. So there may well be legitimate reasons why there are difficulties with Section 33, but I think we need to have a public debate about that and not have it silent. For example, one of the alternative solutions may be to do something like the safe harbour arrangements of the US Department of Commerce has, rather than doing something equivalent to Section 33. But the main thing that I and PISA have requested really is that there be a public debate on that issue as well, in addition to the issues that have been addressed in the review so far. And the other point I would make is that even though there's been a consultation process and trying to bring things up to date, there is a whole lot of additional work to do landing on our plates because the Europeans have now done the cookie directive. The Americans are looking at do not track lists and things like that. So there's a lot of issue around cookies and tracking and things. So we certainly encourage both the government and the Privacy Commissioner's Office to start actively looking at those, as I'm sure you are, and we look forward to future consultations and proposals to change the law in that regard. That's all I'll say.
Thank you, Ian. Let me turn over to Andy. Today you're representing IT Voice.
Yes. Unfortunately, this evening we don't have the ISP and also some IT service providers representative. And because I'm also working in the IT security aspect, so many of my comments will overlap the previous two commentators. But I try to use another perspective to present my view. In fact, if you look at this the consultation paper from the government, the first impression that comes to me is there are a lot of considerations. The consultation paper put up 8 considerations, and those are balancing the business interests and also individuals' rights. To me, my impression is the overall consultation bias more on the business interest rather than the individual's rights. If we talk about privacy, it's more an individual, a person's right. We need to protect the right of the person's own data, how it is stored, how it is used, and when this data is exposed, how the individual be informed and protect himself. To me, this paper gives a lot of leeway for business. For example, in Hong Kong, the specific situation in Hong Kong is we have a very weak consumer community, and there is a lack of class action litigation. So consumers, individuals, are in unfavorable side. And if you put up a requirement for data processors to they need to make a contract, and not by the required by the law. They need to use a contract, a civil perspective. But if you talk about a contract, there are two sides. If you're making a contract with a big corporation, if you are only an individual consumer, you are in disadvantaged position. And there are other perspectives like what Adam's point on. It is not the leakage that is being punished. That is, if there is a leakage done, and there's an enforcement notice served. If the service provider and then not following that notice, they will be punished. And at least you are being exposed first. And for an individual consumer, their rights is not putting at the top position. They are always in the unfavorable condition. So I think this is the philosophy of this paper. And then the most important perspective I want to raise is this. The second perspective is about forward-looking. When Henry delivered his presentation, he slipped his tongue in. He said, we are in the coming 10 or 15 years, and he corrected to be minutes rather than years. But I think it's years, because when you do a consultation, you do an amendment to an ordinance, it will stay for some time, for example, 10 years. It's true, it will stay for a number of years, not just 10 or 15 minutes. If we are looking for forward about the impact of this legislation or amendment, we are losing the ground to move forward Hong Kong's unique position in privacy protection. We are seeing a global trend that a lot of services like cloud computing, like social network, they are dealing with a lot of personal data or corporate data being distributed on the internet to a public space. This kind of data will be more and more exposed. At this stage, we need to protect this kind of data at this moment by a good legislation, rather than to have some compensation when the leakage is done. So I hope that the legislation will be more forward-looking, and not just for looking back for the people's problem, like not people's problem. If you look at some of the other countries, previously I talked to a Japanese government advisor. He is proposing the strategy, information strategy for the Japanese cabinet. He said the Japanese government is quite eager to put forward more strict privacy protection, not just for the rights, of individuals, but for the business opportunity, because they know that some countries like Singapore will be very aggressive in putting up this kind of legislation in order to comply with the European Union personal data protection directive to get the business to Singapore. For example, if there are data centers to be built around the world, when European countries have selected an Asian partner, there are a lot of choices. You can go to China, you can go to Hong Kong, Singapore, elsewhere. If you are the European countries, which will you choose? This will echo Henry's point about cross-border trans-border data protection. If we do not have a forward-looking legislation, we are not only not protecting the rights of the people, and we are losing our business as well. This is my comment. And may I have two questions to ask? One is for Adeline, is about my comment about bias to the business. About the voluntary data breach notification. Does the government has a plan to put forward mandatory notification when you propose a voluntary notification at this stage? If not, do you think that the business will really practice voluntary notification if they know that they inform the victims that the customer's data is breached? They will suffer maybe a competitor's attack on their incapability to protect their customers. This is my first question. And the second question I have is when I listened to Henry's presentation, the privacy commissioner is proposing to have the power to carry out criminal investigation and prosecution, as well as some power to impose monetary penalty, right? Monetary penalty. The power to impose monetary penalty is a bit, to me, is a bit of judiciary power. You are asking for a law enforcement power and also a judiciary power. Do you think it's a bit more for a single institution to own so much power?
SC has asked his questions, and I think Ian and Alan, your comments were noted. I just want to take the privilege of being the moderator and the host to say the words of mine and summarizing some of the things that our three other commentators have talked about. From my point of view, I see that if we look at it from a very directly IT industry perspective, there are probably two main areas that some IT companies are most particularly worried about when they look at the consultation. The first one is obviously you mentioned about the biometric situation, because many IT companies felt at first that if it is singled out as a sensitive data, then it would send a bad message about the use of certain technology. But of course, right now the government legislative proposal is that they're not going to do anything about sensitive or classifying sensitive data at the moment. And actually, I do agree quite a bit with Alan's comment about your comments that you're basically saying that it is probably less important to talk about what is sensitive data, the classification, than the enforcement itself. If we classify certain things as sensitive or not sensitive, but then again, there is no effective enforcement, then it really doesn't matter at all. It really doesn't change the situation at all. So in that sense, I do agree that with Alan. At the same time, I think maybe right now, if we're not really effective in enforcing many of the probable problematic areas with personal data handling, then maybe it's a little bit premature to single out particular sort of data as sensitive. But then again, I do agree that it might be necessary to continue to look at what other jurisdictions are doing in this area and maybe whether or not we need to catch up. Because it seemed to me at least that the concept of classifying certain data as sensitive and then especially enforcing them seemed to be a relatively new development in some of the other jurisdictions at the moment. The other thing to directly affect the IT industry, of course, is the issue of data processor. And even though the HASPA is not here, I've tried to put my former hat on. I do believe that telcos and ISPs and so on, they would prefer the option of an indirect enforcement for obvious reasons. As far as business is concerned. But I've talked to the privacy commissioner. Of course, he has somewhat of a different view as the industry in this regard. And I think there's certainly also reasons to think that possibly the current arrangement or suggestion of an indirect enforcement there may be a situation where certain issues or infractions may fall within the loophole, and there's certainly some concern about that. And it's the first time I heard Ian's suggestion about making a classification or making a distinction between the different kinds of data processor. And I think that probably really is an area that we might want to look into as sort of a middle ground. On the issue of mandatory notification, I also very much agree with Ian that there is certainly quite a bit of disincentive to a lot of organizations in releasing their possible, breach, because if there isn't any mandatory notification requirement. So I always had the thinking that it might be possible for us to at least classify certain particular types of companies handling very, again, I hate to say sensitive again because more sensitive areas of handling personal data, for example, banks and other sort of companies that, in particular, those sectors that are currently regulated by their own particular regulation. Whether or not there might be possibility of really enforcing a higher level of notification for those organizations. First, as a matter of getting more experience in handling this sort of notification issues. I think one area that our three commentators hasn't really talked about, and I would still want to bring that up again, even though Evelyn and Henry had mentioned about it before, is the issue about criminalizing certain offenses based on malicious intent. Because initially there were some concern in the public about whether or not it would create inhibiting certain people from saying what they want to say on the internet or whatever. Even some people speculated that would it put an end to the human flash search type of sort of activities that some young people on the certain forums are actively getting involved in. So that actually, I think Evelyn actually has the answer for us, and maybe it would be of some interest for some of our audience here to hear whether or not that is adequate. And finally, I want to also echo Essie and Ian. They talked about how to make the legislation more forward-looking, particularly mentioning things like handling cookies, tracking mechanism, and so on. We saw today that Microsoft is saying that they are going to put in certain anti-tracking technology into their browsers. And certain other countries, including the US, has recently put out an initiative or discussing whether or not they should set up some do not track sort of framework for internet activities. Now, of course, there are a lot of the difficulties with that is, of course, all these technologies are changing so rapidly, and it might become difficult to enforce. But still, how do we? I think my question is really not in particular whether or not we can do it now with this particular legislation, but how do we figure out a way that we can enforce or we can react faster in future for this sort of technology development, understanding that we also still have to maintain a balance with due consultation and legislative process and so on. How do we make that balance? It might be a difficult question to answer, but something I think very important still for us to ponder, particularly when we see, for example, are we seeing other jurisdictions reacting a bit better and faster in these aspects than we are in Hong Kong? That would be actually the last question that I want to ask. So anyway, we put up a lot of questions, and I think we should give a little bit of time to Evelyn and Henry and Wilson to try to help us answer from your point of view, and then hear from our full audience.
Thank you. The commentators have made a number of comments, and I don't think I will have time to respond to them little by little, but I'll just respond to the major ones and also the question particularly raised by Essie. His question, his comment was first that the consultation report gives him an impression that proposals are biased towards the business sector. But interestingly, when I briefed the business sectors in the last 2 months, what they have been telling me is a little bit different. Let me quote an example. at the seminar organized by the Hong Kong General Chamber of Commerce, a panelist kept insisting that banks should be allowed, or there is nothing wrong for banks to use the personal data collected from their customers who just open an account, for example, a saving account with banks for direct marketing purposes. They believe that this is a very legitimate usage of the personal data of their customers. And then the Privacy Commissioner and I tried very hard to explain to him this is exactly what the Octopus incident revealed or exposed. The public are very concerned about the way the personal data are used by banks or insurance companies and all that. When they open a bank account, they expect the banks to use the personal data only for the purpose of handling matters related to the banking accounts and nothing else. So we have to do some education with the business sector, and I would think that the proposals we put forward in the consultation paper, in particular regarding the transfer or use of personal data for direct marketing purposes and also unauthorized sale of personal data, are very stringent. And I've been warned many times that we should not overdo or overkill this time. We have to listen carefully to the views or comments of different sectors, including the business sector, to see whether our proposals are workable in practice and whether they will bring undue or unexpected problems to the operations, not only for companies, but also for some other organizations in the public sector or in the non-profit sector, because organizations in the non-profit sectors are also handling a huge amount of personal data, and they have to abide by the provisions in the ordinance if our proposals are passed into law. So we have to strike a very careful balance in this. And of course, both consumer interest or personal data privacy, as well as not unduly undermining our economic efficiencies, are also important considerations in our exercise this time. And back to Leslie's question about breach notification. We are proposing a voluntary system currently, and as asked whether the government has a plan. Well, I would say that at this moment, judging from the feedback that we got from the public last year, the public and also organizations and business as well are very concerned that there are currently no common or standard notification standards regarding, for example, the circumstances triggering notification, to whom they should notify, or to whom they should send the notification, and also the time limit for doing notifications. If you take a look at the guidance note issued by the Privacy Commissioner in June this year, you will notice that the word used by the Privacy Commissioner we encourage data users to do blah blah blah, or data users should consider blah blah blah, and notifications should be made as soon as practicable. So you can see there are no clear or definite, clear-cut criteria to define under what circumstances notifications are to be made, and to whom notifications should be made, and also the time limit or even the content of the notification. So that explains or demonstrates that there is clearly no common standard or practice regarding how notifications are to be made. And if we are going to make notification mandatory this time around, I'm not sure whether our business and also organizations in non-public or non-profit sector will be able to abide. And what we're proposing now is for the Privacy Commissioner to do more public education and publicity about notification guidelines, so that we can adjust the detailed arrangements. And also the government has been taking the lead. After a review back in 2008, all government departments are now required, this is a mandatory requirement, to report data breach to the Privacy Commissioner if personal data are involved. So we are, within the government, we are working on this, and we will also review our own experience and see how our own experience can be extended to the private sector. And this is something we will continue to do. And the second question is for the Privacy Commissioner's office, and I'll leave it to them later on. And back to Charles' question, we touch on data. Well, I think both Charles and Alice consider that instead of classifying certain data as sensitive data, we should rather look at the consequences of breaches or leakages or something like that. Well, I would just like to highlight that, in fact, in the data protection principles in the ordinance, there is one regarding the security of personal data. And data users should take all practical steps to ensure or to protect the data against unauthorized or accidental access, loss, or evasion. Having regard to the kind of data and the harm that could result if those things happen. So this is already in the law, but of course, enforcement, as the two gentlemen said, is another matter. But I think the consultation report that has been published has highlighted the importance of different aspects of personal data protection, and also consultation or discussion in the community in the past 2 months has also heightened public awareness. So we hope that with more public education and awareness, enterprises as well as organizations in the public and non-profit sector will be paying more attention to the protection of our personal data. And back to data processing, and try to propose a different way to tackle the problem, which is to differentiate or classify data processes into different categories and then impose upon them different types of regulatory regime. In fact, we have been looking into the issue from that angle as well, and we have examined or taken legislation of overseas jurisdictions. The laws that we have researched into, which contain definition of data processing, in fact, are quite all-encompassing. The definition of processing in those laws encompasses basically all steps in the data processing or data retention, collection, retention, processing cycle. So it's quite different, quite difficult for us to differentiate or try to classify data processes into different categories. For example, what criteria should we use? Should we use, for example, ISPs, ICPs, by the types of industry they are in, or should we classify them according to, for example, the types of activities, for example, storage, processing, or whether they add value to the data. So that's not an easy exercise, but I can assure you that we will continue to look into it, and if we are to put forward any proposals to amend the legislation, we must come up with a very clear definition of processing, because our additional requirements will be imposed on data processes. So we must let data processes know that they are caught by the legislative amendments. So this is the direction that we are going. And Charles also mentioned about our proposal to make a disclosure of personal data obtained without the consent of a data user for malicious purpose and offense. As I explained earlier during my presentation, this proposal targets at acts such as employees of a company obtaining personal data of the company's customers without the consent of the companies and then disclose or sell those data. So we're targeting at those behavioral acts. We are not targeting at common behavior of our internet community. For example, leaving messages in chat rooms, in a blog, or whatever. So, for our new proposed offense, there are a certain number of criteria. First, there must be some obtaining of personal data from a data user. So this condition has to be satisfied first. And the second is that the obtaining of personal data is without the consent of the data user. And third, the data has to be disclosed either for profits or for malicious purposes. So all these conditions have to be fulfilled before such an offense is committed. And also we propose to provide for some defense in the legislation, and we welcome views or suggestions from the public as to what kind of defenses 2005 for this new offense. And lastly, Charles mentioned about how we can react faster. Well, as Charles pointed out, legislative amendments are a very complicated, not complicated, not an easy or simple exercise, I would say. We need to do some consultation as what we have been doing, and we also have to make sure that our proposals are workable in practice and would not bring undue burden on the business sector, to data users, either in private or public sector, and also even to ordinary citizens who may handle or come across personal data in their daily lives. So we have to be careful. But of course, if there are huge problems, the government will surely react faster, and we may not, if there are any single problem that we feel need to be addressed instantly, then I think the government will not wait until all the other proposals are ready if they are in this such an instance. And I would like to quote an example. There can be 2 amendment bills to a single ordinance in just 1 year if there are really such needs. For example, the Inland Revenue Ordinance has been amended twice or even 3 times within a year. It all depends on whether there are circumstances requiring the legislation to be amended so frequently. So what I can say that is the government will try to be responsive. Thank you.
Okay, my turn. I think I want to begin with many comments and questions. Allow me to just address 3 questions for the time being. The first one is to respond to SC's question about the Commissioner wanting to have the monetary penalty power. I think I could also speak for the compensation power as well. We believe that the deterrent effect that would be given us or allow us to give to the daily user of having that power is sufficient to justify, as it were, of having both the investigation, the regulatory, as well as the punitive power for that. Bear in mind that having these kind of compensation or monetary penalty power is a lot faster process than going through the courts, and therefore the implied deterrent of having those powers is very great, even though we may never exercise that. The other thing is, as I said before, whatever system we're going to get, chances that there will be an appeal mechanism attached to it at the end of the day. So it's not as we could do everything ourselves. There's good check and balance on that. And also, I understand that there were comments about a regulator should not have those punitive power in the common law jurisdiction. But I want to say that, in the case of UK, they do have the monetary penalty power, the UK's Data Protection Authority, and in the case of Australia, they do have the compensation power as well. So some other common law jurisdiction, power do exist, and they do make good use of those for deterrent effects. Second point I want to address is Charles talked about the biometric data, that he feel that maybe we're not quite there yet. We want to wait and see how the international community is working on that. But I just want to say that, as I said before, the European Union, Australia, and even Macau do have the sensitive personal data regime in place. In the case of the EU and Australia, for a number of years, and in general, all these jurisdictions, the definition, except I have to say, except biometrics, they are pretty much covered in terms of definition. So we do have a lot of past experience for overseas jurisdiction in terms of protection of sensitive personal data. The third issue I want to address comes from both Ian and Charles in terms of the data processor definition, I would say. Again, maybe I wasn't very clear in terms of talking about the so-called direct declaration requirement. I want to reiterate that. We're really just asking for 3 things. First 2 being that whatever the data user trusts you to do, you keep the purpose of the data to that boundaries. And however long the data user asks you to keep the data, you keep for as long as that. So in the case of ISP or even cloud provider per se, as you mentioned, if you just hosting, for example, maybe it's easier example, if you're just hosting a space or rack space or even a server space, then I think the general expectation is that you have sufficient physical as well as logical security. If you're just renting a server, then you make sure that people put data in and don't somehow have a backdoor to extract data and use it for other purposes. And after the contract is finished, whatever data remain in the server, you have a proper way and record of replacing that. So in terms of the respect of the purposes and intention of that, I think the expectation stays there. And in terms of the reasonably practical protection of commercial data, again, if you are offering a physical infrastructure, then we expect at least to have a physical security arrangement. Is everything locked? And is there any access control? If you are giving a web space or server space to other people, have you actually given all the access power to other people and backdoor, that sort of thing. So the requirements, as far as concerns, really depend. And in terms of reasonable practical arrangement, it very much depends on what you're offering as to the general expectation. Again, I just want to say that the requirement of direct regulation of data processes is not targeting the IT industry. The Commission doesn't want to see the whole regime falling apart just because the IT industry has a major concerns, or even a subsector of the IT industry having that particular concern. Again, the legislative proposal is pretty much at the moment on the policy side. We welcome any suggestion to bring forward from the IT industry as to how to strike balance of protecting the entire personal data protection in terms of data processing. We just want to make sure that's the case. Also, if you have anything to
Just
supplement?
Yes. It's always difficult to be the last speaker because most of the useful points have been covered by the other speakers. What I am going to do is just perhaps 2 or 3 points which are mainly clarification. First is to supplement Henry's point and also in answering Essie's point about whether the Commissioner is actually exercising the judicial power in asking for power to award compensation or monetary penalty. Henry has basically covered all the points, but what I would like to clarify is that, of course, the Commissioner is not exercising judicial power, but in the course of exercising his power under the ordinance, the Commissioner is to investigate, can investigate a complaint, and perhaps a data breach incident, like in October's case. And during the course of this investigation, having considered all the evidence, the Commissioner will have to interpret the ordinance themselves, to interpret perhaps the data protection principles or any particular sections of the ordinance. You may say that it is kind of quasi-judiciary power, and in interpreting the provisions of the ordinance, the Commissioner make the findings, make a decision as to whether the data user is in breach of a requirement of the ordinance. Then you may say that the Commissioner is exercising quasi-judiciary power. And of course, the power to award monetary penalty is, in a way, address the public concern about the sort of unsatisfactory result of the Octopus incident. Because after the Octopus incident, most of the people would wonder why the data user would not receive any compensation or any penalty from the Commissioner. And this proposed amendments would somehow address this issue. About the monetary compensation, of course, you should be aware that in a data breach incident, for data subject, even if the data subject may suffer some kind of damage, the damage may be
or even if it can be quantified, the amount would be minimal. So one would be difficult to expect that data subject to go to court to ask for compensation. So the beauty of giving the power to the Commission to award compensation is to redress, is to give some kind of a redress to the data subject, even if the quantum of the damage would not be significant at all. That's basically what I would like to cover about SC's point. The other point, as a clarification about Alan's comments about in the Octopus incident, the Commissioner seems to be shy away from exercising his power to issue enforcement notice. By way of explanation, I need to go a little back to the background of the ordinance, because when I read the background of the ordinance, what I understand is that the whole idea of the ordinance, as it was enacted, was to ask the data user who is in contravention of the ordinance to correct what they have done wrong, is to remedy the situation. That's why the provision empowering the Commissioner to issue enforcement notice is only limited to the power to order the data user to remedy the situation. It's sort of to give a second chance to the data user to correct their wrong. And of course, it is understandable because in some extreme cases like Octopus incident, of course one could say that, well, in a serious situation like this, it may not be good enough just to ask the data user to stop the practice or to correct or to remedy the situation. We should have more power to punish the organization. But on the other hand, you and I may be data user, and for some small organization, they may be in contravention of the ordinance, but not in a very culpable manner. So at the end of the day, the ordinance as it is would enable the data user to correct the wrong. And the whole idea of the enforcement notice is to give them a time limit to comply with the ordinance. And if the data user fails to do so, then the enforcement action would move to the second stage. That means that will constitute a breach of enforcement notice, and it would attract criminal sanction. The Commissioner was not shy away from issuing enforcement notice in that, because the ordinance clearly says that, well, in order to notice, you have to satisfy the condition. The condition is that there must be a likelihood of repetition. Now, in the Octopus incident, the contravention would involve collection and use. Of course, we also say sell, but sell is not a distinct concept under the ordinance. The sale part has the implication of use of personal data. So at the end of the day, even if we issue enforcement notice, we will ask them not to stop using the enforcement notice, to stop using the personal data. And in effect, the Octopus has stopped the practice and has agreed not to recruit new members. So even if we issue enforcement notice, there would be the same result. Even as you can see, we accept the undertaking that Octopus has given. That's basically what I would like to cover. Thank you.
Thank you, Wilson. We've taken up quite a bit of time. I don't want to hold everybody here too late. It's already close to 9. But we still need to give some opportunity to those people on the floor, or people on the floor, to ask any questions that you might have. Let's try to get us out of here by 9:15. And I think that's late enough for most of us. Any questions from any of you?
Yes, actually, I just want to ask Ms. Wong that, according to the current legislation, material gender forge and basic purpose is exempted from the ordinance, and I just wonder whether the proposal means is to, regarding the selling of information with malicious intention, is also, exempted. Which means the journalistic material will be exempted from this new proposal. That's the first one. And the second one is still about the proposal 3 is quite disturbing because the malicious intention is so wide, and even though you said that there is 3 criteria that you have to meet before you commit this quote-unquote crime, but it is easily fall in this category because, for example, Charles has mentioned the Press Church. Actually, we all know that this church involves some software which is sell. Don't puzzle because I heard from people that they did sell a software for media and for other people interested to use that particular, I don't know whether it's software or mechanism, anyway, they can use it for Press Church. So even though journalistic material is exempted from the proposal 3, other people who use this or they use money to buy this software and have a Press Church may fall into this one. I'm not sure. I just want to ask and hope that you can clarify it. And also I would think, if it is the case that some innocent people might fall into the proposal 3 made by the government, I think this is the responsibility for the government to avoid this wrong trap of people, other than asking the public to give you some idea how to avoid this. And for another point that I would raise, like a consumer, we usually see from the very small, looks like a fires from the bank or insurance company that they will say collecting this information for the particular purpose they said. But usually they will ask an additional clause and other marketing purpose, something like that. And I just wonder whether this additional clause is regulated by the new proposal, and if not, what extra or adequate protection given to the consumer? Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Mecca, for your 2 questions. First, about proposal 3. As we mentioned, the consultation report, news reporting on journalistic activities are currently exempted under the ordinance. So we would expect that for the new proposal, there will be similar exemption for news reporting as well. And your second part of your first question touched on those innocent activities. You also mentioned some kind of a search software, which I'm not very sure. I understand it. But anyway, it all depends on the circumstances of the case. What we're proposing is that if someone obtains personal data from a data user without the data user's consent, then it is the first condition. So looking at it, if someone obtains information or personal data from a data user without his consent, in a way, this is some kind of fact, depending on how you look at it. And then this person discloses the personal data for profits or for a malicious purpose. Of course, malicious purpose is to be defined. Then the question is, should we criminalize such an act? The question is, should we criminalize such an act, or should we condone it? So if you're talking about human flash or search or whatever, well, I'm not a very active net user. I'm not particularly clear about how it's done. But I think that I was told people will try to dig out personal information about this poor guy and then put it on the web. So it all depends on how you dig out the information. If it's from your own, for example, I know Charles, so I just put his personal information on the web, then I did not obtain his personal information from a data user without his authorization, without the data user's authorization. So I will not be caught by the new offense. So it all depends on the individual circumstances. And the question is that we're asking the public is whether such an act should be criminalized. And the feedback that we got last year during the public consultation is that yes, such an act should be criminalized because it's grave contravention of the data protection principles to the extent that this should be criminalized. But of course, the question or the concern is how malicious purpose is to be defined, and we need a very clear definition. And also, we also propose that there should be defense provisions, and we are now consulting the public on such defense provisions. And the reason for these defense provisions are that such activities, although they might fall into the definition, are justifiable and hence should be given defense clauses. And what we can come up with now are those defense provisions in the UK legislation. We'll make reference to them. But if there are any other situations or scenarios that we have overlooked, then we welcome input from the public in this regard. And your second question is about an additional clause in the file. Sorry, I did not quite catch what you said because someone chipped in or tried to help to describe the additional clause and I didn't get it. Could you say that again?
Not an additional. Usually they will have they also have the small verse, like a conditional terms that you agree or accept. But usually you have no power as a consumer to object those clauses. And usually at the bottom of these terms, they will say, once you agree, you need to accept the purpose of collecting this information for this purpose and promotional or marketing purpose or any other purpose that the company think fits. Usually there will be some clauses like that. And this is, to me, of course, it's not very protective to consumer rights. And also it is not particular or specific enough if by law, but I do not know whether it's only my fault, and so I would like to have your views on that, whether this kind of, to me, is non-specific clause can exist after the amendment was made.
Well, now I understand it. Well, the practices that you mentioned, in fact, are being tackled not only by our new proposals, but also by the work that the Privacy Commissioner's Office has been doing. First of all, about the current regulatory regime. In the Privacy Commissioner's view, or in his interpretation of the ordinance, these bundled consent, so to speak, is not fully in compliance with the data protection principles. And also, you mentioned about any other purpose or vague description of the purposes. This is also not in line with the data protection principles. So that's why the Privacy Commissioner has issued a new guidance note providing guidance on how data users should use the personal data that they have collected for direct marketing purposes. But the problem is that even if data users do not comply with these guidance or the provisions in the data protection principles, under the existing ordinance, what the Privacy Commissioner can do is only to issue an enforcement notice, which is not an offense, which does not carry any penalties. So the deterrent effect may not be that satisfactory. So that's why we have put forward proposals in the consultation report. And specifically, our proposal requires data users to be specific about the purposes they're going to make use of the data. They have to be specific about the marketing activities that they are going to do. And they also have to provide an option for the data subjects to choose not to agree to the use of his personal data for any type of direct marketing activity, to any particular class of transferring, and also to the transfer of any particular kind of his personal data. So we're proposing an opt-out regime. So there will be a choice for the data subjects. So in future, after the law is amended, if, for example, a bank would like to use the personal data of his customers for to transfer to, for example, an insurance company for direct marketing purposes, the bank has to inform his customers clearly and specifically about the intended marketing activity and also the intended transfer, and also give an opportunity for the customer to opt out. So this, we hope, will solve the bundle consent problem. Sorry about my long explanation in response to your question.
Any other questions? Any, or even follow-up questions, or from our three gentlemen on the panel? Everyone very hungry? But no question? Well, if not, I think it's a very good chance that it's a great opportunity for us to ask questions. But if you have a representative of both PCO and CMAB here, but if you don't have any more questions now, and if you want to talk to them for only a few minutes, I don't want to keep them here too long after the end of our session. I think you're still welcome to do that. And make sure that if you have any other comments or views, make sure you get them into the Bureau by the end of this month, yes, end of December, so that it will be counted toward the consultation. So let us give a round of applause to our guests from the and also our three gentlemen commentators. Thank you.